Okay, if by my watch it's 7 p.m., I think we can proceed. So the first item on the agenda, well, first a call to order and then approval of the agenda.
I'll move approval.
Seconded by Tracy. Any discussions, additions? Question then, all in favor? Contrary? That looks like it's carried. Thank you. If there's little pauses, that's because I'm flicking back and forth to my Adobe Reader app to look at the agenda. Next is the adoption of the minutes from March 2nd. Moved by Tracy. Seconded by Larry Carlson. Any errors or omissions? Question then, all in favor of the minutes as circulated? Contrary? Looks like it carried unanimously. So I guess we turn it now over to our consultants. Melissa, are you speaking on the engagement process with stakeholders?
Actually, Andrew's going to give a presentation this evening, but maybe before we do that, just so we don't forget, perhaps Paula could read the piece about the conflict of interest, just so we don't forget it.
Thank you for that, because that was basically arising out of the previous minutes.
Okay, so I received some advice from our lawyer, and I'll just quote what he had to say about conflict of interest. The conflict of interest rules in the community charter only apply to elected officials and therefore would not apply to the OCP steering committee members.
Okay, is there any questions from members of the committee? Pretty straightforward. It's we're not a decision-making body. We are an advisory body.
Can I ask a question? I don't remember what the initial question was.
There was Ian put the question and requested to receive in writing whether or not he, as chair and a member of a group warfare society, was in conflict of interest.
Okay.
So being a member of a group warfare society does not, well, we the committee are not in conflict of interest. We are not elected officials.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thanks for that, Janet. Okay, back to you, Melissa.
Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, who's going to give the presentation this evening.
Right, let me know if you can see what I'm sharing.
We're good.
Good, okay, perfect. So thanks everybody, good to see you again. This is our third meeting. Welcome. So tonight, we'll be briefly giving an overview of the engagement that we've done to date. So we've got an update on our stakeholder engagement, an overview of the survey results, which is kind of exciting, summary of the virtual open house feedback, and then we're going to turn it over to you for the first in our series of research team presentations. Then we'll go over some brief next steps, and that'll bring us to the end of the agenda. So just as a reminder, we're moving through our process. We're still in phase 2, though we're very close to the end of it. We've done a lot of our community and stakeholder engagement. There's a few more groups we still need to meet with, including Tsleil-Waututh. So we're still trying to get a hold of them and arrange meetings with them. And we're slowly moving into phase 3, which is the actual plan development. So that's where we get to roll up our sleeves, take stock of everything we've learned so far and begin to craft that draft plan. So list of stakeholders we have met with to date. We've met with Metro Vancouver Planning and Parks Departments, the Sasamat Outdoor Center, the City of Port Moody, Sasamat Fire Department, the Port Authority, Chamber of Commerce, and TransLink. We did reach out to Anmore, but they politely thanked us and said that they had no comments at this time. So that's just being noted in our engagement log. Stakeholders we've reached out to and have not heard back from or have not had a chance to have a meeting with yet. Tsleil-Waututh Nation, BC Hydro, the Community Recreation Association, and the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. So we're still arranging meetings with them. Community survey results. So the survey was available between February 21st and March 15th. So the folks had a few weeks to respond. And we got a total of 111 responses, which is very impressive. And that's a 17.2% response rate, which is really high proportionally. And yeah, so that's exciting from a level of confidence in the survey results. Just a couple fun facts on the demographics of those who responded. We got a lot of response from people who have been in the community for a really long time, which is great. So people brought a lot of community knowledge to this. So 27% of respondents had lived in Belcarra for over 40 years. In addition to that, 34% said that they lived in Belcarra between 20 and 30 years. So that's great to see. The age of respondents tended to be on the older end of the spectrum. So we've got 34% were between 65 and 74, and 29% were between 55 and 64. Makes sense given the tenure of a lot of the respondents too.
Andrew, on that point, if you look at the Statistics Canada age distribution, as a community, our age distribution is skewed to the higher end.
Yeah. So one of our first questions in there, how would you describe where you live? This is an important question for us because as people living in the community, people tend to have names for where they live, and we need to know what those are so we can consolidate those with our maps and make sure that we're all talking about the same place when we're developing the OCP. It also helps us determine, are we hearing from the whole community or just, certain neighborhoods, or how is the distribution going? So most folks said they lived in Bedwell Bay or Belcarra Bay. And then we got a lot of responses from seemingly all over Belcarra to a lesser degree. So I think there's fairly good distribution there. Just recognizing that most people live in the Bedwell Bay, Belcarra Bay, or Main Avenue areas. It's kind of a fun one. We asked everybody to give 3 words that they'd use to describe Belcarra, and we took all of that information and we made this word cloud. So larger words were repeated more often. Smaller words were words we just heard once or twice. And so as you can see, it produces a very interesting graphic. So, the things that really pop out that were the largest were, Belcarra is quiet and beautiful and unique, and it's got community and it's peaceful. There's some other words in there that, signaled some of the issues that we've heard through other parts of the survey, like division or stuck and words like that. But there's a lot of words in here describing just the neighborly feel, the rural and the natural character. And it's just an interesting kind of graphic that really tells us in simple terms, what people are, what comes to mind when they're forced to describe Belcarra in just 3 words. We also asked, what do you love most about your community? And this was an open-ended question. Many of the questions in the survey were. And so we took all the answers and we themed them by just to group them so we could get a sense of what people were talking about. So the main themes that came out of this were people loved the natural surroundings, the rural setting, the sense of community, the peaceful environment and access to nature. And so under each one of these headings are more detail on what people were actually talking about when they were talking in those themes. So for natural surroundings, they meant like ocean, the forest, the wildlife, the scenery, and rural setting, the remote location, the quaint small town feel, the sense of community. Many people said that Belcarra felt safe and friendly and had a small population. And for peaceful environment, it's quiet, tranquil, private. And for access to nature, people mentioned parks and trails, waterfront access, and all kinds of outdoor recreation. When asked, what's one thing you would change about Belcarra? Governance and policy came out on top. And then it was a tie between questions about general infrastructure servicing, community division came up, active transportation infrastructure came up, access to recreation amenities, services and events, traffic, parking, and noise and visitor access. So there's a lot of things that are at issue for the survey respondents. And a lot of those things are kind of in a dead heat, let's say. But it's important for us to know that there's a lot of priorities amongst residents that they're all kind of weighing the same, and that's what we're hearing here. Ooh. We also asked, in 20 years, Belcarra will be. This was an interesting response because we've got quite a range here. So a lot of respondents said Belcarra will be essentially the same in 20 years. There's also 19% of respondents guessed that Belcarra might be amalgamated in some way. We don't know which direction people were thinking Belcarra might be amalgamated in, but that's people's guess for 20 years in the future. Rural, community, village, and unique and attractive were next. General improvements were also listed, and a denser, more diverse community was also guessed at, and then fewer people responded that Belcarra might become more exclusive. It might be in danger of becoming overused. So these are people's concerns for the future as well. And then there's some people that said they didn't know, because none of us really do. We also asked about 3 emerging priorities that Belcarra should be planning for. And instead of listing just the top 3, we've listed everything that people said, so that you can get a sense of where the entirety of the survey respondents' priorities lie. So the top priorities that came out from from this were emergency preparedness, infrastructure and servicing, and financial sustainability. And this is pretty interesting because these also reflect items in the Belcarra strategic plan, if I'm not mistaken. So there's some questions about servicing there, wildfire safety and financial sustainability in that document as well. So these are items that clearly have a history in the community, and they're coming up again in the survey. Housing and population, active transportation, access to waterfront recreation, the next top three. We heard a lot about these as well through the survey as well as the open house. And then in further descending order, traffic and visitor management, climate change, environmental management, maintaining community character, governance, affordability, and events, amenities, and services in terms of emerging priorities. Next, we asked about specific attributes that make up Belcarra's community character, and overwhelmingly, people responded to natural surroundings. So, clear importance there of just the setting, the natural setting, and access to recreation for people living in Belcarra, and that sense of community. So, nice to see some of these attributes here too, because what's important, and these also reflect more closely the things that we heard in the word cloud. Again, we asked, is there anything that detracts from Belcarra's community character? And we see some of the same themes popping out again. When we ask questions different ways, the same concerns are coming up. So, it acts as like a check for us to make sure that we're hearing things and asking and getting to the roots of what people's feelings about the community are. So governance and policy was, again, top of this list. We've also heard a lot about traffic, pollution, and parking. Community division coming up again, infrastructure servicing, maintenance and general appearance. I believe that was the strongest that one showed up in the survey results for this question. And then in descending order, amenities, services, and recreation, housing affordability, population, financial insecurity, infrastructure and servicing, which should be tied into the infrastructure and servicing up at the top, and waterfront access and participation. So that was the main takeaways of the survey results that we received, and there'll be a summary of that provided in the draft or the final OCP when we do a final report as an appendix that details all the community engagement done to date. Next, we'll do a little summary on the virtual open house feedback. So that was held on March 10th from 6 to 8 p.m. And we had 51 people join, including counselors, committee members, and staff and residents. So we had a good turnout for the open house. We gave a small presentation, and then we largely went into small breakout rooms where we asked some of the same questions in the survey. So when you think about Belcarra 20 years from now, what does your ideal community look like? What needs to change about Belcarra today for your ideal to become a reality, and why? And what emerging priorities should the OCP address, and why? And again, these were open-ended discussions, and we were taking notes on basically virtual post-its throughout. We had several breakout groups and I believe 5 facilitators working. And yeah, the summary of these was all consolidated and themed together. So like some of the survey results, we conducted a bit of an analysis on these just to pull out the main themes and get at some key takeaways. So for ideal, what does your ideal community look like? Belcarra in 20 years. Some of the main themes, I won't go into the detail of all the comments, I want to make sure that all the research teams have an opportunity to present as well. So key takeaways from 20 years, where we got a lot of comments about housing and affordability, infrastructure, servicing and emergency preparedness, being a diverse and equitable community, where there's a lot of discussion around that, recreation and commercial investments, active transportation, protecting the environment and climate change action, a rural community, and financial sustainability. So these are the things that are important to people who are at the open house, and things that they want to see reflected in Belcarra in 20 years' time. And I believe a copy of this presentation will be made available on the website after this, so you can have a closer read at some of these notes as well. So key takeaways from question 2, what needs to change about Belcarra today? So main things we heard, key areas of change. We had a lot of discussion on subdivision and housing options. So this is a question a lot of people had. I'm not presenting any answers right now. This is just what we've been hearing. Environmental management, climate change preparedness, a lot of discussion about that. Local transportation and community access, community amenities, services and recreation. So that's like recreation services. Governance, citizen involvement and community building. Also important, financial sustainability, cross-jurisdictional collaboration. So how does Belcarra work with its neighbors? Community character, and again, infrastructure and servicing changes were talked about during the open house. For emerging priorities, it's interesting how these, and these aren't, I believe these aren't ordered. So these are just what we heard there. So things at the top aren't necessarily the most important ones, but emerging priorities that we heard, infrastructure servicing again. So clear themes coming out of this engagement. We're hearing a lot of the same questions and concerns from folks. Emergency preparedness, community building, engagement, financial sustainability, active transportation again, subdivision and housing options, commercial opportunities, waterfront access, cross-jurisdictional collaboration, and environmental management and climate change action. Again, so that's what that's the feedback kind of summary from the open house. So we'd like to spend the bulk of our time together today hearing from you and getting into discussions about what you found through the homework assignment. So just as a reminder, the research teams, we're going to be doing some monthly presentations about different issues and how they're addressed in OCPs. And we asked you to go find some OCPs and discover how the issues that you were assigned were addressed in other communities. Maybe pulling out some policies that you liked that you thought might be applicable to Belcarra, or just other observations that you found during that review. We'd also be interested to know which OCPs you chose to review. So hoping to hear a little bit on that. So yeah.
Okay.
We have template. We gave a template. So this month's theme, is environment and climate change. And so we have groups presenting on wildfire safety, environmental integrity and habitat restoration, invasive species, climate change, emissions and reduction and strategies.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, we have 3 subgroups, and well, moving from left to right, Janet Rizicki is spokesperson for wildfire safety. Janet, do you want to take the floor?
Sure. Okay, on our topic of wildfire safety, we looked at Belcarra's OCP in terms of, what the current situation is as far as recommendations in the OCP. And there was comments around supporting the Wildland Interface Fire Management Plan of 2005 and implementation of strategic initiatives. Also, there was, the discussion around the plan shall address forest fire protection measures, non-combustible roofing, siding materials, green spaces, landscape vegetation. It was a bit of a catch-all there. Perimeter protection buffers, evacuation routes, and water supplies. So that was another piece that was in the current OCP. In addition to that, there was a mention of adhere to relevant fire smart building guidelines that apply to temperate rainforest and a coastal environment. And we'll talk more about fire smart because that was something we were relatively consistent on in our group in terms of continuing with. And then implementing a wildfire fuel reduction program. And again, that's something that we would see carrying forward, but I'll get to that in a minute. And then encouraging Metro Vancouver Parks to pursue the implementation of fire protection, installing of water lines, hydrants along Tumay Wheaton, Drive. And anyway, so I don't know to what degree some of those things have actually been implemented or not. As far as OCP examples from other communities, they ranged from absolutely no stated policy, as was seen in the village of Anmore, to noting the need to create a plan in Lions Bay, to a completely comprehensive separate document, as was the case with, I believe it was District of North Vancouver. And I mean a comprehensive document, which obviously I think is overkill for Belcarra, but those are kind of the ranges that we saw. Some address under disaster resilience planning, some under emergency preparedness. And, and again, like I say, they're sometimes a completely separate, document. We sort of felt, I think, as a group that a subcategory under whether it's environment or emergency preparedness or something would make more sense for us based on our size. Some also indicate the policy, note a baseline and assign a target, which, kind of feels right. Across communities, there's widespread promotion of the fire smart approach to this issue. And the thing that was interesting is some of them also promote, WebEx education to community members and track the progress of that. So I don't know if there's some way, I don't even know if we're tracking when the people are coming to our door and promoting and what the uptake is of that, but that might be something we want to think about. So again, encouraging or mandating via permits fire resistant building materials in builds or renovations. Having emergency evacuation plans in place. And I think this is pretty key for Belcarra based on our sort of one road in and out. Working with regional and provincial partners to coordinate wildfire response plans. Again, also key to Belcarra, and we'll get into that in a minute. And one of the things that stood out for me was in the town of Sydney, in their OCP, in their overall OCP for 2007, they start each section with community context. And I think based on the fact that we all kind of feel that we're a bit unique and different in some way, shape, or form, starting with a bit of an overview of what our community context is probably makes sense. That, describes the unique community characteristics and maybe helps everybody understand the recommendations that are made. Policies from others that, are applicable. Lobbying provincial ministries to develop fuel management plans for Crown lands and residential interface areas. Nesting wildfire protection under a subcategory. So again, whether it's environment or safety or whatever we want to call it. So I think that those things make sense. And then also listing actions with a low, medium, or high priority with cost and or person hours associated with it. So I think that, you know, when we say, okay, we're looking at all the things that came out in the survey, whether it's, you know, financial responsibility, whether it's, you know, all the things that we want everything. But if we, you know, can identify what the cost and person hours associated, that probably makes sense, whether it's this element of the OCP or any other. And again, offering FireSmart workshops with WebEx and tracking participation, encouraging or mandating the use of fire-resistant materials and evacuation plans that also include support for vulnerable members of the community. So again, on final thoughts and recommendations, we had ramp up support for FireSmart with educational opportunities and tracking, working with regional/provincial partners to coordinate a holistic wildfire response plan, pretty key for us considering where we're situated and, you know, who borders us. And then establish an evacuation plan that includes support for vulnerable or more isolated members. And it's funny that in the survey, emergency preparedness was one of the key things that came out. So I think, you know, this would help us address that. And then also, you know, just a thought, it sounds like the consultants, you've already met with the fire chief, so that's good. I think that those people obviously have some pretty key insight into, you know, what could help in this area. And then one of the things Ian brought up was this exploring the rooftop sprinkler options, and mentioned that it could be, you know, limited to those that are served off of wells due to water supply, which raised another question for me, which was, okay, maybe we missed something there. But that's potentially an option too, to look at that sort of thing in terms of protecting homes. And then develop a fuel management plan in partnership with BC Wildfire Service, including provincial crown land and regional parkland. So those were kind of the key things we came away with in terms of our look at this topic.
Thank you, Janet.
Okay.
Andrew, did you want the committee to ask questions and discuss that presentation some before we move on to the next?
Yeah, I think so. We've got time for, you know, about 25 minutes per topic. So we thought we would, you know, we could start with a presentation. And thank you very much, Janet, by the way, that was great.
You're welcome.
And so, yeah, we can open the floor for questions and discuss any aspects of this that people would like. And then we can move on to the next topics. So, yeah. Okay,
it's open to the committee now. Questions? Or comments? Wait, Sandra, are you trying to? You have to unmute.
I'm unmuted. Hi. I have a question for you guys. Do any other municipalities have a fuel management plan for Crown land? So my big thing is right now we back on to Crown land. And there's a lot of dead, dying, decaying trees. And there's a, you know, so, I mean, it would be great to have something. I don't know what other municipalities have done about it yet. So I noticed that you mentioned that. I'm curious.
I'll just say something on that in that our biggest challenge in Belcarra is we have large swaths of regional park and whatever policies they have. We have a large swath of provincial crown land. And basically, I'm not aware of any interface management plans that they have, except the provincial government sponsoring things like FireSmart. And that's why during our discussion, one of the things I think is important is that Metro Vancouver municipalities along the North Shore need to lobby the new provincial wildfire service that's been created to bring in a first or a priority response for Metro Vancouver watersheds, Metro Vancouver parks, and the provincial crown lands that just absolutely surround the northern side of Metro Vancouver. Janet?
I don't have any other further insight into that, and I don't know what kind of plans might exist out there for that type of thing, but it's a good question. So it's probably something that needs to be looked at, Sandra.
Tracy? No. Ian? No. Okay. Any other questions? Any other
Joel
comments?
has his hand up.
Who? Oh, Joel did. Sorry,
Yeah.
Joel.
Just a question. Did your group look at the water access only fire protection issues at all, or did you notice anything from North Vancouver that was interesting for them in terms of community access that isn't by road?
Yeah, and I think that's a good question, Joel. And I think that, you know, if you think about it, I mean, if a wildfire were to break out today, I'd be jumping on my paddleboard and heading out in the water. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be trying to go via the road if there was any issue there. So I think it's a really good point. And although this plan isn't baked yet, obviously, you know, the water evacuation plan would have to be part of it. Because depending on how things went and where the fire was, you know, you're going to get out as quick as you can and the easiest way you can, and it may well be by water. So that's a good point.
If I could jump in, the evacuation plan, I think, is key. We've had in the past a couple of fires up Twin Islands way. And of course, you're surrounded by treed mountain slopes, and that's true around Cozy Cove as well. The only answer is aerial attack with water bombers, either helicopters or planes. We saw, for example, in the Twin Islands area, a cabin caught fire, and the fireboat attended. This is a few years ago, but even right there on the water, right in front of where the cabin was, the reach of the water jets was only so far. And meanwhile, the fire was progressing up the hillside. So the reality is, even with a fireboat on scene and trying to deal with it, the only way to deal with it was through aerial water bombing. So from my view, when it comes to parklands and crown lands, it's mission critical that the BC Wildfire Service make it a priority for that, you know, for them to attend to those sorts of fires. Ian, did you have anything?
No, not right now. I see you got two people waiting, so.
Oh, sorry, Larry Carlson. You got to unmute, Larry.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to build a bit on what, or offer comments on what Sandra said and some of your comments, Ralph. I started looking at things. I was in the group that was looking at emissions, and I started thinking about fires, and fires are not, if you prevent fires, you're not reducing current emissions, but you're certainly preventing very major emissions in the event that a fire takes place. So I think reduction is really important, and it's probably not that straightforward to look at trying to do major reduction in forested areas, but I think to the extent it could be done, I think it's something that would be really valuable to look at. And there's you know, other jurisdictions involved. There's a lot of parkland. There's been comments made, you know, about, you know, fuel loads in forested areas, things like that. And I just wanted to offer that comment because I started thinking about that a fair bit. And I really think it is important to do what can be done on the prevention front, as well as having the response and all of the other things that go with it.
Thanks, Larry. Sandra. Got to unmute, Sandra.
Sorry, I didn't actually have a comment. I was just listening. Sorry.
Oh, your hand, you have your hand symbol up.
Okay, I'll get rid of it. Sorry.
Okay.
Lower hand. Okay.
Yeah, it takes a while to get used to these things. Any other questions, comments?
I have a comment, if I may. I will forward this to the committee, but Metro Vancouver, they do have a group that will respond to fires in parks. I'm just on their website right now, and they have an emergency preparedness plan for all the parks if in case of a wildfire. And I'll just read this little section here. So regional park staff are actively engaged in fire prevention and attention throughout the fire season, May to October. Each park has a fire preparedness and response plan that includes description of access for fire vehicles, possible staging areas for fire trucks and command stations, locations of fire hydrants, water standpipes, and other water resources. But I will send this to the committee because I think it's an important information for you to have as far as parks goes. Okay, so I'll just forward this right now to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Ian, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess it's appropriate just to comment on these sprinkler systems that people are starting to look to basically sprinkler their house. The concept being that it's not a water spray, it's more of a misting exercise, so it wets down your roof and also the surrounding area. Now, the problem that I see with these is that they're usually set up to get the water system going and then leave your house with the sprinkler system going. Now, I caution that we haven't got enough water in the Tatlow tank if a lot of people put these systems in to be able to actually just set the system up and leave the village with it going, because that's not going to be the best use of that water. So I think that's something we got to look at, and the water committee was concerned about the low water setting on the Tatlow tank. So if right now the setting, I think the minimum is sitting at 65%. So if we have the fire break out at that low level, there's not going to be enough water to go around to sprinkle a lot of houses using these systems. So in the meanwhile, we're hoping that we can raise the water minimum setting in the tank so that there's actually more water available for firefighting. But anyway, I think the concept here is that these should be probably encouraged for anybody that's got a well and hook onto your well using these systems, and that would be excellent. Rather than try to use the municipal system, because I think we're going to want to try and keep water for firefighting if we can. But if the fire is so big that we're abandoning the village, then I guess best thing is to just put the sprinkler on and use the water and hope for the best. So they are excellent systems, but the question is how much water is going to be available for fighting the fires.
So you see that as part of the community education program? Yeah, we haven't got all the answers yet from what's going on with the water system. There's still some engineering work to be done before we can conclude just how much water available we have. We're also still trying to pursue getting some extra water from District of North Van. And so we're running right now about 21 liters per second on the refill. And it would be nice if we could get up to around 35 liters per second. But so far, District of North Van doesn't have the extra water to supply us with. So that's the yeah, the point I was trying to make, there's a whole range of things under the community education aspect of the Fire Smart program. And that includes building materials used, you know, for the outside of the house. Now that hasn't been embodied in the BC building code, but certainly advising people that when you replace your roof, you know, you don't want to use sheet or shakes. You want to use, you know, some other durable material, is steel, tile, whatever it happens to be. Similarly, the outside cladding of the buildings. I don't know, Ian, you've mentioned the kind of trees to use around your property for landscaping.
Yeah,
you know,
I think
those are, I mean, there's a whole range of items that would fall under the community education aspect.
Yeah, that the tree committee put an excellent list of foliage together as far as what would be recommended and what are not recommended. Unfortunately, Belcarras, we're cedars and hemlocks, I guess, is the the tree of choice around here right now. But you know, there are other options available. I guess the other thing that surprised me when I got a review done on my property was the emphasis they put on that first meter around your house. Is they actually want no combustibles in that area. So I was really surprised how emphatic they are on that point. So I think if anybody, you know, has foliage growing over your house, I'm in the process of cutting my bushes back. So join the crew.
Exactly. I mean, when you live in a jungle, that's a full-time job, chopping it back.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, Melissa, you got your hand up.
Let me just start. I do, but Marianne, if you want to go first, I have some just sort of general comments for the whole group.
Okay, Marianne, you got your hand up. Okay, unmute, Marianne.
Okay. I was just wondering whether, Ian, when you're talking about, just the people with, right now, the people with wells could look into getting these sprinkler systems. There are homes, as far as I understand it, where people have hooked up to the water system, but were allowed to keep a well for, their gardens. And those people also perhaps could be, educated and encouraged to look into doing that, installing those kind of sprinklers.
So you're Marianne, you're right. Some people have opted to keep their wells. It's all about when you're making wine, you want water without chlorine in it, things like that. But the thing there is that the well system is totally separate from the household system that's connected to the municipality. That's
right.
Yeah, I guess the other point is that there's two types of sprinkler systems that some people try to use. The lawn sprinkler units, which are quite a high volume of water being used in them, as opposed to this other system, which is a misting system. So if you it depends on which one of the two you're using. Obviously, misting would be probably preferable because it'll dampen the surfaces and it's the embers falling on your roof that will catch your structure on fire. So that's where the dampness comes into play there. So definitely anybody with a well could be encouraged to put these systems in. And then if you want to spend a little bit extra money, instead of using your power supply go on a fire pump that's independent of the electrical system. So if you had anything failing, you've got that. But this is sort of system that how much do you want to spend, and are you technical enough to put it together, or are you going to have to get somebody in to do it for you? I don't know.
Well, back to the education program with the community, which includes providing the background information, providing sources of suppliers and contractors that even do that kind of work. Once that information is made available to people, then they can decide, is it a do-it-yourself or do I hire someone? Okay, I got 3 hands up. Marianne, are you still?
I was just going to kind of ask one other question or put something out there that somebody could look into perhaps, which is that if there are 4 houses that actually border on GVRD or Crown land or provincial parkland, is there a mechanism, or could we find out and educate the community on a mechanism where a homeowner can go to them and say, you know, you've got a tree that is within a meter of my property, and some of the branches are quite large, and, you know, could we, you know, would they trim the branches? I mean, is there a policy for that or anything?
Not a well, that's an excellent question, Marianne. And I know there's varying experiences. Ian is somewhat knowledgeable on this, but I saw other hands go up, and I'm going to just go to Kevin Ferris first, then to Carolina. Kevin? Unmute.
So,
yeah.
Hi. Sorry, I just had a couple of comments. I'm not sure about trimming the trees as far as getting permission from Crown land, but I just wanted to make a comment about water sources and for the sprinklers. I found the sprinklers quite effective when I was up in Clinton a couple of years ago helping with the forest firefighting up there, and they had quite a lot of sprinklers set up. And one of the things that they use is portable pumps to set up, there's like a lot of lakes up there, and that was sort of a very effective way if you're not wanting to use municipal water for the sprinklers, because spot fires will often happen when there's a big forest fire, and the sprinklers were quite effective in putting those out. And one thing, just a note too, on municipal water for putting out forest fires is sort of a silly idea as well, as far as like when a major event happens, there's not enough water in the pipes to put out a forest fire, and they're quite impressive when they start rolling. So I just sometimes when I'm hearing things about bigger tanks to put out forest fire, it's laughable, because I'm a municipal firefighter with the city of Vancouver, and so we were just out there helping out. And a few years ago, when there was the disaster called, and we were rolling by with like in a $1 million truck, seeing mountainsides just ablaze, and it's quite humbling when you see that, and it's the you're just sort of waiting for it to burn out and maybe putting out support fires here and there and trying to save a few properties.
Your only hope is the water bombers.
Yeah, the water bombers. And also what was really effective is fire breaks. Fire breaks, once it comes to a certain point, it stops burning. So you get the bulldozers in, and they're going to, make a big, they'll just cut off Belcarra. So if everything's ablaze, they'll just, mow down a bunch of trees.
I want everyone to picture now Metro Vancouver hiring chainsaws and bulldozers to cut fire breaks between their park and our village.
Yeah,
that's
basically
the reality is that one isn't going to happen.
Yeah,
Carolina.
But when the fire's burning, it'll happen though. Like that's the motivation. So.
Yeah, but it's at that point. It's
but
really
not right now.
Yeah,
not right now. Yeah.
Carolina?
Thank you. First, I have to say, first, we're very lucky to have a couple of firefighters here in this committee because this is when we talk about fire safety, it's a big thing for this village, and for obvious reasons. So thank you for the insight, Kevin. I have to agree with Kevin. Fire breaks are probably the best thing we can do along with sprinklers, but also it's true. It's not realistic to ask this from parks. Parks will, parks has one mandate, right? Which is expand parks. So get more land for parks. That's their main mandate. However, I do want to touch on the subject of pruning trees at parks. I was on the Parks Board last year, and I spoke to them about that there was a great concern from many of our residents that border parks land, as well as Crown. So they did provide me a phone number that you can call from one of the parks people that works here in Belcara. And if you have a great concern of a tree that's actually a concern and it's something that's dangerous, you can call them and you can talk to them and go from there. That number is posted on the village website. I will provide the link to the chair and vice chair so they can share with the committee. Another thing I would like to talk to, and I touched on this when we were on the tree committee because I was the councillor liaison for that. Actually, North Vancouver has a program for fire breaks. And I'm not, I'm just putting it out there that it exists, but that it takes a lot of money. It's, you have to have the money to do something like that. But they actually have a program I will look into and send the same link that I sent the tree committee at the time about this. And they have done that in parts of their land there, which backs out to Crown land, and they're creating fire breaks. But again, you're going to do 100 meters of fire breaks on a very dense forest. I mean, it could cost you a fortune, right? When I'm sure if anybody had to hire anybody at some point to come cut a tree at your property, you can pay up to like $3,000 a tree. It depends how big it is. So it's good for us to know those informations, and it's good to know that there are programs like that out there. And I wish that we could do all that, because I totally agree with Kevin. Like the best way, honestly, in my view, after so much research and talk on wildfires, everything that I've learned and read this past years, and I talked to a lot of firefighters from Vancouver, all over the region, as well as professionals that do that for a living, so I could understand. The best thing is fire breaks and sprinklers. So I guess we should focus on sprinklers. I'll tell you that. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolina. Andrew, your hand went up. I know Melissa is in the queue.
Melissa was first, so maybe Melissa, you should go. Okay. And then I've got a couple quick things. Just
okay. Well, I think we probably have to start moving along. Where'd you go, Mary Ann? You had your hand up, and now you've disappeared on me.
Oh, okay. I just had a real quick question for Kevin. When you were talking about pumps, or Ian, an engineer or a firefighter, are there saltwater pumps that, could be used even at a householder level?
There are, and you should use them. We're surrounded by water. Right. Doesn't matter if it's got salt in it. Go for it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Melissa, and then Andrew.
Thank you. I don't want to talk too long because we do have 2 more presentations to go through, but Janet, I did want to thank you for your presentation, and it was very nice to see that your group did exactly what we were hoping. You looked at a variety of OCPs. You got a sense of the breadth of difference between them, how some OCPs can be silent on issues, and then, as you mentioned with North Van, go into very specific details. And each community, that's part of the art, right, is finding that fine balance of what's appropriate for you. There are some challenges sometimes when you move more into the specific. You want to ensure that when you're writing your policies that they're going to be relevant 5 years from now. And we know that technology changes rather quickly. And so I'm always hesitant to get too specific in those areas. I think you hit on a lot of things that Andrew and I had identified would be critical for your plan. Fire evacuation plans, both for the land and for the water, public education, I really like the point that you made about identifying what is a priority and noting the resources that would be required. And this just goes back to, again, our philosophy when we're writing policies, that the more specific we can make them, the better chance you're going to have in actually getting to a place that you envision. So thank you very much for that. And I guess just my last comment being, there's a lot of wonderful discussion, and sometimes we tend to get more into the specifics, and I'd like us to try to stay a little bit higher level with some of our comments. But all really good ideas. So thank you very much for sharing those with us.
Thanks, Melissa. Andrew.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a couple of the topics that people have brought up so far. I've got a copy of Kelowna's Community Wildfire Management Plan open, and this isn't an OCP document, but I think it's a really good one to highlight for wildfire review. I mean, Kelowna, being a larger city, has more resources to put into a plan like this. It's also had pretty significant problems with wildfire just due to its climate and history and everything. So, you know, some of the things that it says might add some clarity to some of the discussion. So there were some questions about, you know, Crown land and you know, where does the municipality fit within that? And you know, in the Kelowna's document, they state that they default to the Ministry of Forest Lands Resources policy. And so by stating it like that, instead of getting too specific, it points you to a place where the policies are being continually updated without the municipality having to do so itself. So that's a pretty good key, you know, just direct people to where, you know, the wildfire, you know, people update their own policy. So that's one takeaway. The other one was fuel load. So this is a really good topic. How Kelowna addresses this is they talk about fuel load in terms of places where fires are more likely to start. So a lot of fires that are problems are human caused. So by reducing fuel load in places where humans tend to go, that's kind of the key ticket. So that goes with the education piece in terms of people cleaning up their properties in all kinds of different ways. Also, it goes from a municipal perspective as to things and parks, things like mowing ditches and making sure that those are cleared. You know, people throw a cigarette out the window, and that's how a lot of things start. So reducing fuel loads in places of high activity can be one way of reducing things. But you know, what about
just eliminating people?
You could do that. Nobody, you know.
I'm sorry, I couldn't read this. You said human cause. They said, well, and get rid of the people.
Yeah, I mean, everything's on the table. I don't know. But
well, actually, I'm sorry to interject, but we laugh. But on the other hand, we're surrounded by a park with all kinds of visitors, and the one thing that scares me are the people that come in with the cigarettes, you know, or even just driving down the road. I'm sure we've all followed a car where we've seen the cigarette flicked out the window. Mm-hmm. That scares the hell out of me.
Yeah. So, you know, just being conscious of time, and I think this is a really great segue, is, you know, this is a good thing to plan for, and it's an important part of the OCP, but we also have to recognize we're in a coastal rainforest where it is very wet for a lot of the year. Climate change, though, is slowly changing that. And so policies related to that, I think, are worth the next discussion. And I think that's our next group.
Okay. Who's a spokesperson for climate change, environmental? Marianne, who's the spokesperson for your group?
Okay, we're not climate change, we're environmental integrity, habitat restoration, and invasive species. And I'm the spokesperson.
Yeah, okay.
My mistake.
So, Joel, where have you gone to?
My internet just keeps cutting out, so I'm just coming back on again.
Okay, you're climate change.
Yes, would you like me to speak to that now? I missed the last couple minutes here, so.
Yeah, okay, if you're the spokesperson for your group?
Yes, I will be.
Okay, please proceed.
All right, would it be okay if I share my screen? It might be easier for people to see what we looked at.
Hang on 1 second, I'll just make you a co-host so you can share. There you go.
All right, can people see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were asked, that was Larry, Carlson, Kevin, and I were asked to look at the climate change item. And what I'll do is I'll start off by going down to the last part, the goals that we had. We kind of a number of goals. So 2 goals, I think, for Larry and I, and then Kevin had a comment about it. So my first goal was to prepare and adapt the community physically to climate change realities. So supporting improvements to our drainage system, culverts, and vegetation, fire breaks, and home design. But we were also pretty careful here. We didn't go into the fire protection that much, because we knew there was a separate item that Janet's group was working on. Second goal for me was to encourage meaningful greenhouse gas emission reductions from individual residents to meet our targets that were, I think, identified last round in the OCP. And I was hoping that this time could be a bit more stringent in terms of a bit more of an effort at without penalizing people, but making a little bit more of an active effort to do this. And an idea that I had was trying to use the incentives somehow to encourage people to make a few shifts, that, just to show that the community is on board with the idea and advocating. I know we have a very small role compared to the province or the feds, but just to help put us on the map as being a community that seems to care more about that stuff. For Larry, and again, Larry, Kevin, feel free to speak up if you have something that I miss. So he said, I believe climate change is a high priority, and specific, meaningful, doable items should be identified and prioritized. This should include specific items that can be done by residents, possibly with some incentives like John mentioned, if workable. A couple of examples would be heat pump installation and replacing gas-powered tools with battery-powered, such as trimmers and leaf blowers. With current batteries, the tools are powerful. I was similar, identified a couple of things like that would, I think, make a difference. Second goal, this is where, again, he talks about fire issue. I also believe steps to reduce the risk of wildfire is a high priority in terms of preventing a fire and also reducing the risk to a house if there is a wildfire. This isn't a reduction as such, but more of a significant prevention of a potential catastrophic event. Many of the areas involved, forests within parks, are not the direct jurisdiction of Belcarra, so this could involve significant work over time. And Kevin spoke to how he liked the idea of actionable items, rather than simply just talking about what we hope could happen, that we do a little bit more this time. He referenced the Squamish OCP specifically as being something that kind of connected with him. And he again spoke, as other people have, about Belcarra's natural beauty and hoping that we can preserve that as much as possible. The first thing we ended up doing was, let's see where I've got it. We looked at 3 OCPs. One was Anmore's, it's our neighbor, and there's some similarities definitely. The Squamish OCP is more of a modern OCP, because they have changed quite a bit in the last few years. And Bowen Island is being identified as kind of a separate, more isolated community, which I felt was similar to Belcarra. So what we did was we just went through each of the OCPs and found where there's some common, some connections between them in terms of policy. People can look through this if they'd like, because I'm sure we're going to forward this on to the next group. A lot of the stuff was very similar between them, but there were a few items that were different. Actions. anyways, we went through this. We found out some of the common items that we felt were important. And then we quickly reviewed like a brief summary of what happened last time for our OCP. And I guess up here is the main, the benchmarks in 2007 that we were targeting. By 2020, 33% building and 16.5% transportation up to 2050. And I have seen some other ones as well that other communities have used, and I believe Metro Vancouver as well. So we reviewed that very briefly. People are, I think, somewhat familiar with our previous OCP. So just a quick summary of what happened and some of the actions. It was interesting that Anmore's was almost identical in terms of the order that these went in: buildings, transportation, solid waste, and actions. I think it was a similar pointer. And then we got to our policies and tactics. The section was on the spreadsheet, which I showed you earlier. And with this, we came up with what we thought might be some ideas. And these aren't ones that we necessarily feel need to happen, but just some ideas. And that's for the next group to look at. So would you like me to, I'll just run through these maybe, and might be the easiest. I will start with buildings. So with buildings, we agreed, or we felt that alternative energy sources that were identified in the other OCPs was a useful goal. There's a lot of people, I think, now beginning to use heat pumps in their homes, and I think they have a huge reduction. The big two that we found were housing and then transportation as the significant greenhouse gas emitters for us. BC Building Code, I think, is updated since our last OCP. I didn't go into too much of a look at it, but I know there's a lot of items in there that might be important. As preserving natural vegetation versus making sure we're protected from fire. That seems to be a bit of conflict there. We want to keep our trees to reduce emissions, but we also don't want to create a fire hazard. Brief look at corporate greenhouse gas emissions. The village is very small staff, very limited what we can do, but there is some things. Ongoing support for secondary suites, coach house options. I read through the zoning bylaw. I don't know if I had looked through it before, but I was impressed with some of the options in there. Some of it was connected to what we did last time in the OCP, 2011. Support local food production. We found that was interesting, and more in the other OCPs seem to want that. And wildlife conflicts might be an issue, but it is an interesting one. Home-based businesses to cut commuting. And another item that was identified last time was there's sections of Belcarra that do not have hydroelectricity, water access only properties. I think Cozy Cove would be an example. So we're hoping that could be something we support if that is ever an option to electrify that area. Okay, new thoughts. This was an idea where the village identifies some items that we thought were meaningful and in some way symbolize like some sort of encouragement for people to take it on, and also to maybe just to not penalize people who don't do it, but to say, hey, this is a good way to go and this will help out. And so we thought perhaps a symbolic tax rebate for a few items might be interesting, an option. You drive an electric car, or you have a heat pump, you're helping out, and just that's not an idea we had. I noticed that Metro Vancouver has a clean air plan, 2021, that we implemented below. We thought perhaps Public Works could move to an electric vehicle when it becomes practical, when the other vehicle runs its useful life. Moving from a motor to something electric, that I think would make some sense. We don't have to travel very far in it. Provincial support, measuring community greenhouse gas emissions, flood risk mitigation. We were wondering about that. Is there something we need to do because of climate change? Wood burning fireplaces. So here's an item that people may have some issue with. We looked at the health risks of wood burning fireplaces and their emissions. Although there are sections of the community that may require it, there's a lot of sections that don't require it. I know there's people that feel very strongly about being allowed to burn things. I know the community of Canmore still burns outside, and we get complaints about that from smoke sometimes on the fire department. Wildfire doesn't allow that outside. So that's something to look at. Do we want to discourage wood burning fireplaces? It seems like the region wants to discourage it now. Gas powered lawnmowers, I think we talked about this before, moving to battery if possible. And a question about slope stability. So sometimes we wrote down questions we didn't know the answers to. Is there any risk slope stability in the community? Transportation, we went to that one. So much like last time in 2011, there's an interest in, some interest in improving safety on our roads for walking and strollers and cycling. Active transportation, it's an issue right now with the municipality in terms of people advocating for that. And so that's an item that I would like to see on the OCP. It seems to be a fairly common one throughout any OCP I've looked at. Another idea is increased transit ridership. It's always a great way to cut down on emissions if possible, especially for visitors too coming into the area. New ideas and thoughts. What we had here was secure active transportation funding sources if viable. Again, there's a lot of discussion about that in the community. An idea I had simply away in March and went to Zion National Park in Utah. And there was a park that was closed to the public. You couldn't access with a vehicle, but they had tons of bus shuttles. And I was just thinking that wouldn't that be great if we could cut down on some of the summer traffic and people just, the expectation is that you access the beach with a bus. And yeah, sure, there's some things you can't carry on the bus, but if you saw what happened in Zion, it was like every 5 minutes, there was these big shuttles carrying people in, and you could fit paddle boards on them, whatever you wanted. And it might be nice to cut down on Ioko traffic for people to, visitors to expect a certain time when they couldn't access it. It was an idea. There's this Transport 2050 plan that talks about active transportation. I linked that. The multi-use pathway, as mentioned, is a part of the transportation idea. But I also put multi-use pathway and or Belcarra Bay pedestrian improvements. But there's other people that would prefer to do other things, so put that down. And I guess the goal being that people could access Belcarra Park and Sassamat Road from their house without using a car in an easier way. All right, and this is an item I put in the next one, so I don't live in Farah Cove, but I'm interested in this one. Roadway access to Farah Cove would reduce the trip time for people within Farah Cove to get to the village, and would also bring the community together a bit. I think I spoke to that one last time we did the OCP, and hopefully that can happen sometime. This was mentioned by somebody else on the previous OCP, a rideshare idea. I don't know if it actually got into our OCP last time, but there's options for rideshare co-ops. Okay, question. Lowering speed vehicles on Bidwell Bay Road, is there a benefit to that? Speed bumps. Okay, solid waste. Greater waste diversion and ongoing organics. Some ideas. I don't know if I want to run through them, but looking at making it easier for people to get rid of hazardous waste. And I had a question, I think Carolina answered it when I talked to her earlier. I don't know the specifics, but I remember Ralph always talking about the costs of cross-contamination and what it costs the community if people don't recycle properly. I was just curious about that. And then I think people enjoy being able to access the recycling center a lot of the time, but also balancing that with the costs of having an employee there. Okay, other questions? We've got a big greenhouse gas emission area, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which we don't have any jurisdiction over, but is there anything that we should do with that, support it, support risks of spills and stuff? I also thought marine items, lots of boats in the community. Is there anything there? the air quality during forest fire season sometimes is pretty brutal. All right, I ran through the final thoughts to start with, some of these goals, and I just want to show you, we've got some links down below here of where we got our material from, and I'm sure there's more out there. Yeah, and this is the highlights of the 2030 targets for Metro Vancouver that you can look at when I pass on to you. I think that's it in terms of a quick summary of what we did.
Okay, thank you. If you could, Joel, if you bring us back to the...
Yeah, there we go, okay.
Perfect, thank you. No, thank you for the presentation. Open it up for comments and discussion. Well, wait a sec, Melissa's got her hand up.
I do, thank you. So Joel, I've been hiking in Zion, and I know exactly the bus shuttle that you're talking about, and it's absolutely incredible. So one of the meetings that we've been having has been with TransLink, talking about bus service and some different options on how we can get more transit coming into Belcarra. And one of the things they mentioned is that Port Moody and White Rock both operate a private bus shuttle that comes into the community. And something that I'm exploring with them is how does that work, right? And so there's apparently, if the service is provided free, it's not seen to be competing with TransLink service. And as long as you're not using TransLink infrastructure, meaning their bus stops, then the private bus shuttle can operate in the community. So my question to them is, well, what if we secured funding for a program to operate such a bus? What would that mean? So that's something that we're currently exploring with them to get more information about what that option could be. And the other thing that I've been talking to them about is there's a process where TransLink goes through the exercise of determining which municipalities to provide additional spring and summer service to. So how is it that Belcarra could be considered for this, right? And what is that process? And so these are discussions that we've been having with them and will continue, but just wanted to make you aware that we are exploring some other options.
Right. On that last point, it was just announced this week, I think, TransLink is, they're implementing a every 30-minute transit service from the Coquitlam exchange to Saskmat Lake, Bunsen Lake, and Como Lake. And so in fact, those transit issues are already being actively looked at by TransLink. And I know Metro Vancouver Parks have also been encouraged to promote the available transit options to visiting the park. And really the parking issues that we've experienced in the last couple of years, you know, maximum vehicles, it's maxed out at the peak times of the year. And so it's really incumbent upon Metro Vancouver Parks to seriously look at and promote you know, the use of transit. One general observation to Joel's presentation is there's a theme throughout there. Promote this, encourage that, bring on the next thing. And I'll tell you, we will have at least 1 or 2 full-time staff members doing nothing but residential education and promotion on all this stuff. I know I sound like a broken record on this, but that's the reality. There just is not the staff resources. When you've got 4 people in the village office trying to take care of all the things that are already going on, and people saying, well, let's promote this and let's encourage the next thing. All good stuff. It's all motherhood stuff. But there'll be a hue and outcry when you add the 1 or 2 extra staff. People say, well, why are our taxes going up? So I just want people to keep that in mind. It's all good stuff, but it doesn't happen for free. Okay, open it up for comments and questions. Okay, Sandra, you got your hand up. Off mute, please.
Yeah, I'm off. What I liked, Joel, about your presentation was you mentioned a couple of times about encouraging people to adopt new things like maybe solar energy, or by providing incentives and not penalizing people, like maybe providing tax rebates, because I think that's huge. Because people, you know, they have to get used to doing new things, and you know, to say you have to do it is something people don't like. And the other thing is, I'm a leaf blowers. I have a really big property. I use a gas leaf blower, and quite frankly, with my property, that's the only way I can take care of the debris and the other stuff. Like Larry, I know batteries are okay, but they're not good enough yet. When they get to the point where you can actually run them for, you know, with more than 10 minutes, I mean, that would be something to look at. I know Vancouver has that debate over it. So that was my other comment. So that's something, you know, to be looked at maybe in the future. And the last thing was the wood burning fireplaces. I know a lot of homes have had them. So if we're looking at future, maybe grandfathering people that have wood burning fireplaces would be something to look at as well. Those are just some of my comments on that.
Okay, thanks, Sandra. Marianne, you got your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Joel. That was wonderful work. And I wish there was somebody younger on our team who could do that kind of presentation style. Anyway, in terms of Ralph, what you were saying about cost, and I hear you, and it's always a concern. There are some, you know, creative approaches, and one is, you know, if you find people in this village that are really passionate about something, they may be prepared to do some education for free. We've had wonderful information from some of our professors that live in the community, you know, providing articles in the Barnacle and things like that. So I think if we reach out and ask whether there are people who have some knowledge, have some skill, have some time, and are passionate, that we may be pleasantly surprised at what people are willing to pitch in and do. And the other thing about funding, back in the day, I found other sources of money than the Belcarra tax pot for funding things like the Belcarra summer program. There was a federal program that allowed us to get money to hire students. And, you know, the people who participated had to pay a little bit of money, but not a lot. So there are maybe some creative ways of doing education without it having to be done by village staff.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are opportunities. In the case of the summer program, that was a private group that operated it, maintained it, and pursued it. My concern is as soon as you start saying we're going to do this, that, and the other thing, it raises expectations. And the default is they all turn to the municipality and say, well, why aren't we doing this, that, and the other thing? That's just the reality of it. And with volunteers, bless their souls, they come in, they're enthusiastic, they're there for a year or two, and then guess what? You know, they're not there. And the best example I got of that was the tennis courts. There was a whole tennis club formed. They would look after it all. The municipality didn't have to worry about it. Well, after a while, the tennis club kind of folded and melded into the community association. And the community association sort of ran it with volunteers from the organization until it got to the point, this is onerous. This takes work to look after it. Next thing you know, they came back to this is our community association, came back to the municipality and said, here you go. We can't look after it. And of course, now we're sitting there with a facility that needs to be dealt with and whatnot, and it's going to cost a lot of money. But anyway, I hear you loud and clear, Marianne, but you know, time and time again, the volunteer groups, they last so long, and then they move on, either physically, mentally, or whatever, they move on to other things. Andrew.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I just put my hand up preemptively to just try to recognize that we're still on a time kind of crunch. And so these are all great comments, great questions. I'm sure we'll find a way to share out the research so we can have a more in-depth read, you know, everybody on their own time. But I think it's a great time to hear from the next group.
Sandra's hand up. Sandra? Mute. Did you have it? No, you didn't have your hand up? Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next group then? All right. Marianne, you are the spokesperson for invasive species, environmental, and
integrity and habitat restoration. So first of all, our group reviewed the Belcarra OCP, and we found that, not surprisingly, in the current OCP, the environment is referenced both in terms of narrative that flows throughout the OCP and in various policy sections. The Belcarra talks about in the mission statement, in the vision, in the mission statement, in policies and actions. Then there's an entire section on environmental context. A vision for Belcarra says that people who live in Belcarra do so because of the natural environment, viewscapes, and opportunities to enjoy nature. So obviously, you know, people move here because they want to be in the forest and close to nature. Then there were specific strategies in the existing OCP regarding environmentally sensitive growth and development, land use policies, water sustainability policies, not supporting ocean outfall for sewage disposal systems. And then we went on and looked at a number of other communities. We looked at the OCPs from Anmore, Bowen Island, Lions Bay, Saanich, Salt Spring Island, Summerland, Tofino, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation land use plan. And we found a number of policies and objectives and approaches that could be considered. And those are all gone into detail in the document. Broadly, kind of high level, first of all, we wanted to specifically reference the importance of environmental integrity. And broadly, that means not increasing our human footprint in our OCP vision statement. And then we suggested creating Lions Bay had done this, that we wanted to suggest creating an official committee on the environment that would be tasked with following up and ensuring that the village works toward achieving the environmental, invasive species, and habitat restoration objectives that we put into this OCP. And one of the things that we admired about the Tsleil-Waututh land use plan was the their emphasis on the idea of environmental stewardship, and also they have a very long-term perspective. They talk about 100 years, you know, and just thinking long-term like that can really make people think about what they can do and what changes that they can make that will make a difference over the long term. We suggest including a section on wildlife that discusses habitat preservation and restoration where applicable, that talks about wildlife-human interactions, ways to reduce human-wildlife conflict, protection of endangered and threatened species, wildlife corridors, and just an awareness and acknowledgement that we are living in wildlife habitat. And if we wanted to, that could be a whole, you know, document on its own. And then we recommend providing ongoing education and information on environmental topics, including how to recycle properly, invasive species, what they are and how to get rid of them. Again, reducing the animal-human conflicts, including being bear aware and bear smart. And we did find there's a provincial program called Bear Smart, which is, we could look at whether or not Belcarra could sign on to that. There are other communities that have, but it does require commitment and possibly resources that we may not have.
But on Bear Smart, it's an excellent resource for the community on its own.
Great. What else? And just ways of reducing bird collisions with windows. I mean, that's a small matter, but it's an educational piece that we could do. And Ralph, I know you were saying that, you know, education takes staff time, but there are ways that you can, you know, you make a little video and you put it up on the website and nobody has to touch it for a long time. And then when somebody has a question, you know, you say, well, you know, on the Belcarra Village website, and we publish in the Barnacle that, you know, hey, this information is available on the website. And if you're a new resident, go check it out. And then we talked about adding a section in the OCP. We found in a number of other OCPs, they have a section on natural history and early settlement history. And that's the natural history piece certainly fits into our mandate and topic, but I really like the idea of covering both natural history and early settlement history, and bringing in, it also brings in the fact that Tsleil-Waututh people were here first and the way that they related to the land and the environment. And we suggested some opportunities like promoting Naturescape, which is a BC program that encourages homeowners to care for wildlife habitat at home, encourages native and natural species and natural gardens and things like that. And then there are volunteer opportunities, and these are possibly too specific, Melissa, but so we could generalize them. But at the moment, there's a Metro Vancouver Regional Parks Ecological Restoration Team that I didn't know about until I did this research. And then there's the Belcarra Beach Keepers. And we also found that there are some of the other major parks, Pacific Spirit Park and Minnetonka Park and Colony Farm, have park associations. And that's something we could consider and see whether there's enough interest, not just in Belcarra, but in the broader communities that all, you know and love our park.
A Friends of Belcarra Park Association.
Right, exactly.
Or society, yeah.
Right. You know, we could find ways to maybe sponsor the occasional volunteer day to remove invasive species or plant native species. And then in regard to habitat preservation restoration, village can and should cooperate with and support the initiatives of the higher levels of government, Metro, Parks, the Port of Vancouver, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation. They have the Burrard Action Plan for cleaning up all of Burrard Inlet. And then we could just consider the creation of an environmental conservation fund. And then finally, we put in that the OCP should acknowledge the ecological importance of Bedwell Bay and the responsibility of the village to work with the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and Environment Canada to identify and protect this significant habitat. And then just to close, I found something in the Salt Spring Island OCP that I almost want to plagiarize it for our OCP because it's so powerful. It says, "We live in a place of extraordinary beauty, great environmental significance, and rare biological diversity. We appreciate and accept our responsibility to be the stewards of our island, of our village home, to honor its past, care for its present, and protect its future. We know that it is more important to leave a legacy than to leave an impact." So,
you know, Marianne, I absolutely agree with you on that last part. And what do they say? The highest form of flattery, it's not plagiarism, but I'm going to say plagiarism.
Right.
I mean, you couldn't word something better than that. And I think we should really, really think about including that as a part of the vision statement. The two key words that I want to talk about that you mentioned, stewardship and oh yeah, of course, now that I'm trying to say it, I forget the second one. But, restoration, that was the word. And when you couple that with invasive species, you know, what can we as a village do in recognizing the Bedwell Bay marine and riparian habitat? Dealing with the invasive species in the riparian zone is restoration. It's also stewardship. And so you can embrace all those things with a, you know, invasive species is more than just the riparian zone throughout the village. We know that. But in a nutshell, that strip along Bedwell Bay, we can address stewardship, restoration, and also the other thing you mentioned, Marianne, about wildlife. What was the word? Viewing, not viewing. Anyway, embracing the wildlife viewing, you know, bird watching, what other wildlife along the Bedwell Bay foreshore fosters stewardship. That's where I'm trying to go with the whole thing. And one final comment, we received from the port a map of Bedwell Bay that outlines that, and more recently they've given us an updated map that's a little more comprehensive on identifying the environmental sensitive issues. I think it's important that the OCP make use of that Port of Vancouver reference map for Bedwell Bay as something that can be referred to. And they talk in that within that map, they use different terminology that we haven't been using, okay? They refer to the highway encroachment area. Well, implicitly in that, they're talking about Marine Avenue, which runs the length along the community with Bedwell Bay. And I think we would gain a lot as a community by synchronizing our terminology with the port. And obviously the port is working with the Tsleil-Waututh. And so by synchronizing our focus being the map and the terminology, I think we would go a long way to bringing a meeting of the minds. That's it for me. Now, others, comments, questions?
Ian has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Ian.
Yeah, I guess the first thing, Ralph, just comment on that map you're referring to. I think there's some information on it that's not correct. So I think we got to be very careful that we don't just use that. They're actually indicating an area that is administered by Belcarra, and that's not correct. So that's only one comment on that. The other one is I had a question for Marianne. In March the 8th, I think I sent out what I termed a ditch management strategy for Belcarra. And I was wondering if your group had any thoughts or discussion on that regarding the daylighting of our culverts or ditches.
Oh, we didn't, Sandra, you might want to say something. We didn't really talk about that too much. Most of our ditches are already open. I think I may have asked a question of someone and maybe didn't hear an answer of, I'm not sure where we could remove culverts. So it didn't really come into what we've done so far, but I'm certainly open to the idea. I sent out some questions to some of our, professors asking about habitat restoration. And I was thinking in terms of possible salmon, but salmon streams, but I didn't hear back anything. And we're not in a position in the village to do, something like the Mossam Creek hatchery, so I don't know whether salmon would even come back. If there are any streams that ever supported salmon, I don't really know, but.
Yeah, I think the point and the reason I called it a ditch management strategy is that Belcarra is so far behind in closing in the culverts that we're actually ahead of the system. Because we got, like you say, we've got open ditches already. And I think the concept of what I was trying to say there is that we need a strategy not to proceed with closing in our ditches because they're more valuable to the wildlife and the animals than having a closed over ditch. So I think that was the point that was trying to make. So
yeah.
I don't think we discussed it, and we didn't discuss it in any detail, but in our group. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Angela, you got your hand up. Angela?
Yes. So when we talk about our topics, we are very careful about not to go into too much detail because we think some of the topics should be addressed by the bylaw, or it's not, because we are only providing our what we want, what we wish. It's not a policy making. So we didn't touch that topics in detail.
Okay. Andrew, you got your hand up. You gonna crack the whip?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Not yet, but I just wanted to point out that picking up on the long-term vision of the Tsleil-Waututh plan was a kind of an interesting one. So thanks for bringing that up. I mean, we've had conversations with the Port Authority as well, and a key part of their approach is to also partner with Tsleil-Waututh on the management of like the sensitive areas and everything. So that's going to be a key point for potential pointing to partnerships on managing this environmental issues of any kind, really. One thing that I really, if you've had the chance to read the Tsleil-Waututh land use plan, and I apologize, I was involved in it. So one of the things that I liked the most that came out of that was they actually have a land use designation that reserves a lot of the land, and they called it land for our descendants. And they have a Tsleil-Waututh word in there, and it's land that they don't apply a use to. but it's like it's there in holding for future generations. That's not something that would be applicable necessarily for a municipal OCP, but it demonstrates that long-term view of stewardship and caring for the lands. So yeah, just
Andrew, on that note, we know that Bedwell Bay and the eelgrass beds and the marine habitat in general is a priority for the Tsleil-Waututh. And it is a priority for the Port of Vancouver. And we would do ourselves a great service by embracing and sharing that vision for Bedwell Bay.
Absolutely.
Three groups have presented. Each has a document of notes and comments. And Andrew, Melissa, I'm assuming that you want each group to forward their notes to Paula?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay, so if each group could make sure that they're, and maybe when you forward it to Paula, copy in the rest of us so that we have them for our own files as well. Andrew, we're down to the last few minutes. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I'll just share my screen again. We've got a couple next steps to talk about. I've got your next assignments, which we'll be emailing out later on this week. And
I knew you were going to crack the whip.
Yeah, exactly. It's we only have so much time.
Yeah.
So it's time well spent. Okay, so you can see my screen again. So next month's topics will be transportation, trails, and tourism. So, another suite of topics that have come up a lot in the engagement and our discussion so far. So to this end, we've got group 1, which will be looking at active transportation and trails. So we mean walking, cycling, recreation. That will be Tracy, Angela, Larry, and Paul DeGraff. So we'll be emailing this out because we know Paul's not here today. Group 2, or the next group, will be looking at tourism promotion and management. That promotion can look like anything you want it to. These are questions that have been asked, and so how do you manage that, especially in a place where the influx of visitors is actually potentially causing conflict with residents. So in this group we have Ian, Kevin, Sandra, and Janet. And then lastly, we've got traffic and parking. So this is also, all these things are interrelated. We've got Joel, Ralph, and Marianne. So we'll be emailing out, a similar template with a description of the issue, and we'll go through kind of the same exercise with new topics.
Andrew, if you could, when you send out the template, make it Word format.
Sure. We can do that.
The PDF is great, but it caused kind of a ruffle on the front end of the last exercise. But when it's in Word format, people can dive right in and start adding and editing.
Great. Yeah, we have the Word documents. We create the PDFs, run them. So we'll just skip that step and send you the Word documents.
Thank you.
Okay. So next steps. For us, we're going to be completing that initial round of stakeholder engagement. As I noted, there's a few groups we're still reaching out to and meeting with and setting up meetings with. Next, we'll be diving into that plan. So that's what we'll be defining the community character and starting to draft a vision and some of those guiding principles that will guide the rest of the policy document, and getting into some of the goals and really drafting the full suite of OCP policies and the document itself. We'll also be getting into more of the mapping, and that's going to span April to June. And so we'll give you an update as to where we're at. Hopefully, we're shooting to have that draft community vision and goals that we can start to talk to you about before the document is complete. And our next session is May 4th at 7. And until then, Melissa, you've got something to add?
Melissa.
Yeah, just a couple of things, not so much related to the homework assignments, but the first part of our presentation this evening sort of gave you an overview of what we heard through the survey and the open house. And as committee members, you may have members of the public wondering how their input is being captured and analyzed as part of this process. So we do want you to know that we have prepared what we refer to as a what we heard report. It's in draft format and we've shared it with the village of Belcara already. So it's a more in-depth overview of the various things that we've heard through engagement so far. We're going to be adding to that as we move through the process. So there'll be material that we'll be adding from our interviews with stakeholders and then from our next round of public engagement, where we plan on having another open house. This report, once it's finalized, will be presented to council, so it will be a public document. So the entire village will have access to it. We also do plan on, at our next open house, providing a summary of what we heard from the first round. With engagement, it's really important that if you ask a question, that you then circle back with people to let them know what we heard and what we're doing with the information. So we're going to be sure to do that at the next open house. A couple of things also, just to remind you that the presentation that we gave at the open house is posted on the project webpage, as well as the presentation that Andrew gave tonight. It will be on the project webpage in the coming days, so you can refer to that as well and point members of the community to it if they're interested. And just wanted to thank you all for doing such a thorough job with your homework assignments this month. It was really exciting to see you going out and looking at a wide variety of OCPs and bringing back a lot of really useful information that's going to go a long way with our own plan. So we look forward to reading through your notes more carefully in the coming days once you send them to Paula. But I hope you enjoyed the process and got to know some of your neighbors a little bit better as a result, and look forward to hearing from you again next month.
Okay, thank you very much. Melissa, is there anything else from your group that you want to put before the committee tonight?
I do actually, just one more comment I forgot to make. Through this round of research, when you're going out doing your work, we did see a couple of requests about whether or not committee members should be reaching out to various stakeholder groups. So for example, Tsleil-Waututh Nation or the Metro Vancouver. So we just want to let you know that that's not within your scope. That's something that Andrew and I have been going out and we've been meeting with these various groups and we'll continue to do so. So we'll take care of that and you don't have to worry about that at all.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask for adjournment of the meeting, is there any other questions or comments from the committee? Everyone's ready for bed, I can tell. Especially Ian over there. He's okay. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the OCP committee.
I'd like to.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, that's great.
Good night. Good night, everybody.
Night, everybody.
Great work. Good night. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.